happens, it's hella impactful. I think this comment sums up the Mortal Kombat 9 quick jump scare pretty nicely. The MK9 jump scare is one of the most low-budget piece of shit jump scares ever, and I still manage to shudder at the thought of it when it crosses my mind. They brought this concept back in Mortal Kombat 10 in the crypt sequence, which is much more refined, adding in actual models for the creatures jump scaring you. There is also a small quick time event involved where you have to attack the jump scare, so this one can be just as effective. I do almost feel like this jump scare loses its effect immediately as it requires player input, so from the first time this happens to the player, after they'll be more on edge for it, versus Mortal Kombat 9 version, where it could literally catch you lacking at any moment. You're paying, you're spinning, you're fighting, you're getting goblins. I do commend them for adding in actual creatures that literally jump at you, like the giant spider and this wolf. And overall, I think it was pretty effective, just not as impactful as the Mortal Kombat 9 version. Lastly, they brought back this jump scare idea in the crypt within Mortal Kombat 11, but this one is much different. This is mainly because the crypt now takes place in a third-person perspective, and this jump scare can only be seen if you equip Kenchi's blindfold, as you can only see the crypt monster when he's wearing the blindfold. So it's more of a choice in this version, as once you go into the blindfold realm, you are then susceptible to running into the script monster. And he isn't playing around in this version, as he can literally one-shot the player if he grabs you. I'd say this one is pretty effective too, as it adds a detriment to equipping Kenchi's blindfold, so much so that players say to swing your hammer immediately after equipping the blindfold, since these guys are so ready to hop on your meat when Kenshi gets that blindfold up. Overall, the Mortal Kombat jump scares are pretty effective, as a fighting game is the last place you'd expect a jump scare like this, and I think the environment like the crypt is the perfect place to house these. I don't know, maybe after seeing this guy outside of the jump scare, you realize how dumb he looks, but it doesn't take away from that initial impact of the first time he got your ass, and he got all our asses. Splashdown was a game released on PS2 and later on the Xbox, and definitely drew inspiration from games like Wave Racer and Sony's Jet Moto series. The game did pretty decently in the reviews, getting around 80s to 70s, and pretty fair to decent reviews. While the game was destined to just be another sports racing game that would be forgotten with time, there was one feature that made the game stand out to those who played it when they were younger. This was due to a pretty disturbing Easter egg that would occur if you strayed too far from the racetrack. This isn't just like a typical pseudo-invisible wall blocking players from straying too far off the track either, as you have to go pretty far off the main course to even see this thing. Meaning you're either driving out here to see this thing, or you were paid off beforehand to throw the race so bad that you decide anything else is better than racing. Once you reach the outermost bounds of the map, a giant tentacle belonging to an even bigger squid will grab the player and launch them across the map, ragdolling and all. And man, you get some serious air from this thing. If you have a pretty natural fear of large sea creatures, then this just speaks for itself as to why it's creepy. But I think the jump scare aspect of the thing also helps it out, as you'll be driving off course for a hot minute before this thing makes its presence known. This is definitely on the level of a Hot Shots golf flatwoods monster, as we've mentioned before, wherein the game is so far away from housing scary shit like this that just by sheer virtue of this being in the game makes it pretty terrifying to find. Oftentimes, developers love to sneak in creepy Easter eggs into places that players wouldn't usually discover if they were playing the game like they were supposed to. This often happens with audio cues that can take several minutes to start up, causing only players who step away from the game or leave it paused for whatever reason to overhear. This is sometimes done perfectly with something like the sounds that start playing from the controller if you were sat idle too long in Zombie Army 4. This trend was even present back in the day with games like Time Splitters 2, where if you leave the mission failed screen up for too long, you will begin to hear some disturbing audio cues. It sounds like a monster or something large growling, but in reality it is just a super slowed version of some dialogue from the character Captain Ash from the beginning of the level Aztec Ruins. Regardless of the reason, if it's just a slowed down version of dialogue in the game or not, it's still super creepy and out of place for anyone loitering too long on the game over screen. Many of the comments you'll see on the videos featuring this Easter egg tell tales of how they set the controller down for whatever reason during the game over, and hearing this play out only to think they were going crazy or something. It's a very effective Easter egg for just being some reused sound assets slowed down, and something like this, while it could have been an accidental, seems like the developers having some fun with their frustrated player base since it takes place so long into a game over screen. Either that or a way to play some silly outtakes into the game, as at the very end of the audio loop that plays on the game over screen, there is a woman heard asking, "Is that too loud?" which echoes with a strange eerie effect over it. The randomness of this, combined with the creepy slow dialogue in the beginning, would cause any player to question what they just heard. The woman's voice was actually Malika Dalali, who was a prominent voice actor on Time Splitters 1 and 2, so it does seem like it was just an outtake that had extra effects added to it to make it more spooky. And it was definitely impactful for anyone who experienced this one back in the day. Outlaws was a Western FPS game that released in the late 90s and featured the iconic Doom-style shooting system, except this time in a very different environment. The game was really ahead of its time, featuring one of the earliest examples of a zoomed-in effect for a sniper scope. Yeah, we take advantage of that shit now, but back in the day, this was just the scope on the gun would zoom in, unlike modern sniping, which usually switched to a fully zoomed-in perspective. Yeah, you had to get right up on the fucking screen with a magnifying glass to see this shit. Another thing that made Outlaw stand out back in the day was the iconic creepy Easter egg you could run into in the first level of the game. If you blow up the outhouse and enter through the bottom, you'll swim through murky green water until you stumble upon a secret room that holds some dark secrets. First of all, can I just say this is exactly how I build secret rooms in Minecraft. I was biting Outlaw style for years, and I never even fucking knew it. Once inside the room, the ambience hits you like a train as it appears you've entered one of those spinning zero-gravity fair rides. But in reality, it appears you've entered a spaceship of sorts. Along the middle of the room, you'll find a small window in which you can open and see a few aliens cooking up a whole ass cow. Maybe this is what the Chick-fil-A cow saw for them to be so PTSD'd out of their minds to start that slogan to eat more chicken. After witnessing a pretty grisly fate for that cow, another third alien will come flying into the front of the window, jump scaring the player and shutting it forcefully in front of their face before the Easter egg ends. This seems to be on the same level as the John Romero's head Easter egg in Doom, but takes the idea and makes it a little bit more silly, whilst also adding in a pretty good jump scare on top of that. In terms of the rest of the Outlaws, this definitely stands out as the strangest and creepiest part of the game. I'll just say this here. Outlaws walks to Red Dead full sprint past the finish line, let's be honest with ourselves. Well, that'll top off today's episode of Creepy Easter Eggs from non-horror games. And gotta be honest, I'm running a little bit thin on entries as the non-horror games tag is getting harder and harder to work around. There's a lot of creepy Easter eggs, but usually they're from horror games. So perhaps in the next episode, I will broaden it to just Easter eggs in general, as I enjoy talking about these creepy secrets in games. But if you do have any Easter eggs that you found creepy in video games, let me know down below. And if I haven't already talked about it in the past, I'll include it into a future video. Thanks for all the support recently, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. Welcome everyone back to the creepiest video game Easter egg. I am Gambito Gaming, and I've talked a bunch about creepy video game Easter eggs in the past on the channel, but under the rule that they had to be from non-horror games. I still feel like these are always more impactful since the player isn't usually expecting them in a non-horror game. However, there are just too many disturbing Easter eggs I want to hit in the series, so I'm kind of broadening the scope a little bit. So now we're taking in a lot more candidates for entry in the series specifically. I thought it'd be worth mentioning up top as at least one of these entries for today comes directly from a pretty popular horror game. With that out of the way, I wanted to focus on Easter eggs that I had personally never heard about or really dug into myself. So if you're a similar level of interest as me, then these will likely all be as new to you as the worst to me. Without further ado,